Welcome to That Chronicles. This is a place where veterans get a chance to listen about goodies that belong to us. We're a veterans group here that talk about issues pertaining specifically to veterans and our needs. My name is Rick Prescott.
And I'm Mike Ruffner.
My name is Jason Hertha. And if you like what you hear, please hit the subscribe button for YouTube. It's a bell notification. The like button helps out with the algorithm. And check us out on Twitch, Twitter, Apple, Spotify. We'd like to thank our producers at 216net, Ken Jones behind the camera over there. One-handed clap.
Hello, Ken.
And then we have a goodie here today from Support Over Stigma, based out of St. Charles, started by
Zoeie. I would like to introduce to you Zoeie Kreiner. And she... And I totally appreciate your being here. And I know we got lost this morning. I gave you the wrong address. And plus, it's snowing outside here in Northern Illinois. So that's what threw me off. So that's my excuse. So I don't know what else to say. I know Mike is going to say something. I just know I feel it. It's coming at me.
Yeah. Excuses like assholes, buddy. Everyone's got one.
It's the story of my life. They never, they hold me accountable. But there's nothing to be held accountable for. I'm just,
Even your wife doesn't hold you accountable. She just feels sorry.
I think she gave up on me a long time ago.
Especially when I started doing the googly eyes thing.
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah. You didn't know about that. What I did was I went over to one of the fabric places, and they have these little packages of googly eyes. And what I did was I got this little sticker thing that doesn't smear anything, and I put them on every picture of the house. So everyone, I had googly eyes, all the kids and their baby pictures, all throughout the house, googly eyes. And then I waited. The Sweetums went on for 3 weeks before she finally said, when I was upstairs, and after, I was typing my buddies up in Canada and everything else saying, hey, she hasn't found him yet. It's been 2 weeks. Now it's 3 weeks into this. And finally I heard this, Rick. And I went, ha, ha, ha. I was upstairs. I turned on my camera and I walked downstairs. Yeah, Sweetums, what do you got? You need a place to go. You need to get out of the house. Your retirement is not working. I said, what's up? Look at this. And then I just panned over. I knew exactly what it was about. It was hilarious. Drives her nuts. Drive her crazy.
That's why it's funny.
It is. It is. Poor thing.
Yeah, all the wives feel sorry for her.
I know. And you know what, though? Everyone, including her family members, are now calling her Sweetums.
I'm sure she loves that.
So I have to start a support group just because of you. So.
Oh, my goodness, I'm telling you.
Perfect example of why she needs to join our spouses and caregivers support group.
Absolutely. She's got to take care of him. So,
in all seriousness, she's a phenomenal individual. She's an incredible lady, the love of my life, my soul partner, all that good stuff.
She has to be to put up with
But,
you.
I thought that's what you told the other 5 wives.
Yeah. There was only one more. I call her my practice wife.
Target practice, sir.
So Zoe, tell us about your organization.
Yes,
so the listeners gotta.
Sure. So a little bit of a backstory from my grandfather to my son. 36 have served or are currently serving in the U.S. military. Most of them came home to become first responders, police, fire, EMS, emergency room. So I've always been super involved. But in November of 2019, the unthinkable happened. While my son was deployed 9,000 miles away from home, he lost his best friend, a 22-year-old Marine named Corporal Patrick O'Reilly, to PTSD. It took me 4 phone calls and a 3-star general to get word to him because they were on a black op. And I didn't want him, when they got back to civilization, reading it on the internet. My son called me 12 hours later to tell me that the person who had been his bunkmate in basic and tech school did the same thing. And 2 days later, I got a phone call, and the quote was, my favorite NCO, so-and-so, decided to brush his teeth with his service revolver.
Wow.
And I went into full mama bear mode, right? How do I help my own kid, right? He's a grown adult. He's a grown man off serving his country, but how do I get him resources? And he said to me, Mom, if I go to my boss and I say that I'm struggling, they're going to DNA, do not arm, take my gun. They're going to confine me to quarters, which is a tent in the middle of warm, sandy places. That doesn't do anybody any good. Can't do his job without his gun. So I started doing what mama bears do best, figuring out how to help my own cub, you know? And then I realized how many other people have nobody at home to fight for them. So we did what all good, military mamas do. We started with care packages with mental health information in them, right? Here's 1 or 2 places in the military you can get help, and your boss will probably find out and it'll probably screw your career. Or here's 25 other places you can get help without anybody else finding out, because it's not about usurping authority. It's not about stepping on toes. It's about saving lives. People talk about the 22 plus a day that veterans that we lose. The VA will tell you it's 16 to 17. Most people, I hate this phrase, accept the number 22. But Duke University just did a big study called Operation Deep Dive that says the real number is closer to between 44 and 48 a day.
Wow.
But even at 22 a day, that's 8,030 lives we lose every single year. Nobody's talking about active duty suicides are up 27% across the board. First responders, nobody talks about those, right? Mm-hmm. And the reason we include them in our mission is because 11% of veterans come home to become firefighters. Mm-hmm. EMS. 19% come home to become firefighters, and 25% come home to become some form of law enforcement. So it's just a natural addition. In addition to my son on active duty, I have a son who's a policeman, and I also have a daughter who's a firefighter EMT. So it's just a very natural thing for us, and when we talk about support over stigma, if I come to you and I live in your neighborhood, Sweetums might offer, and I say, I've gained a little weight. She might offer to walk with me before or after work, or join a gym. If I come to you and I say, I'm having trouble, like not making it to the end of the month with my paycheck, you might say, hey, I'm really good at budgeting, or I know somebody who is. But if I come to somebody and I say, I'm struggling and I think I'm going to start counseling, people go into the drama queen mode, right? What in the world was so bad that happened that you have to go pay somebody to listen to you, right? Instead of, that's the strongest, most courageous decision you've made. How can I support you? Mm-hmm. If you live in my neighborhood and you have kids, I might offer to keep your kids so that you don't have to pay a babysitter and for counseling, right? If whatever, there's just so many ways to help. So that's how we got started. That's a long answer to a short question.
Well, that's
I can see the wheels turning. Like there's more questions coming.
Well, no, there were so many items there that you had mentioned. And as you mentioned, this, I'm thinking story. Incident, and people that I know, and so basically what I'm saying is I can relate to everything you just said. Everything.
Well, the biggest thing too is, and this when you go to fight with City Hall there, and what makes an issue is that in 2013, somebody from the coroner's office in McHenry County said that we had 34 suicides.
Right.
And out of the 34, there was like 20 something that were veterans. My thing, because I worked at the unemployment office and I work with vets, my first thing, because the economy was bad, we had Obama in the office, and everything was all up in the air. But my first question to her was, how many were unemployed at the time? So, and the thing is, they didn't track that stuff. Mm-mm. They don't, because that's and on top of it, it's not the younger vets that were dying. It was the Vietnam vets, because what happened was that the kids are grown, the sports are over, and it's just them and their wife, and then they lose their job.
The average age of the veteran who completes suicide, any guesses?
I would say they're probably in their 40s.
60s.
I would think in 60s.
63 and a half.
Really?
Do you know the original study that said, where they came up with the number 22 a day, only included 21 states. It only included if you used a rope or a gun, right. And it only included if the coroner checkmarked the box that said you were a veteran. That's the original study.
Yeah.
Illinois, where we live, has never reported to that study.
Well,
Oh.
they don't want to because
Mm-mm.
then they have to admit to it. Every
During-
year, Level would have a mental health summit,
Mhm.
and because of my job, I would go there all the time. And of course, you had everybody up on the panel, and the big thing is the anti-gun issue.
Mhm.
And I turn around in the work group I was in, I think says, they're so stupid. Why would a veteran hang themselves or cut their wrist or anything? If they're going to do it, they want to be doing it the most efficient way, and click, bang, you're done. No mistakes. It's done. Once that decision's made, it's done. It's not the gun. It's just the efficiency of
It's the most efficient way.
right.
And do you know, after things happened 2.5 years ago when Afghanistan fell, there were conversations with several people, and I was one of those people. A lot of people were calling and checking on their veterans. I was checking on my friends who help veterans, because I know how overwhelmed we all were with the amount of phone calls that were coming through. And there was a veteran, and he's fairly well known in the Chicagoland area, does a lot to help veterans. And I called him, and something just seemed off. Just, I don't know, gut reaction, intuition, whatever you want to call it. And I asked him point blank, are you thinking about killing yourself? And there's this big, drawn out, pregnant pause. And then there was a full blown belly laugh. And he said, do you know how many people in the last week have asked me, am I going to hurt myself? And I could honestly say no, because I was going to laid out his entire plan. And I don't know if I can swear, but said, I'm not going to feel a goddamn thing. I'm not going to hurt. I'm finally going to not hurt for the first time in a long time. Right. And so it's not necessarily the gun. It's just that's the most efficient means to get it done. So when people go and it's suicide prevention and all they want to talk about is gun control, I just want to stand up and yell and scream and holler, because the gun isn't the problem. The problem is we're not doing enough to get them the mental health help that they need. And it can be as simple as you were talking about unemployment. Do you know how many veterans that I work with who are almost homeless, right? They're being evicted, or they have some sort of, and a lot of times it's a medical emergency and they don't qualify for stuff at the VA. So now they have all these huge medical bills they're trying to pay, and they're trying to pay their rent, and they're trying to put food on their table. And so they're almost homeless, and there's very few programs out there that will help in that situation. You think that doesn't mess with their mental health? Right? I have a Marine that I'm working with, grew up with my kids. In my neighborhood, at one point, there were 16 kids on active duty at the same time. Several have come home now, so that number's kind of coming down a little bit. But this young man is one of them. Was a year and a half ago, his wife was diagnosed with stage 4 lung cancer. She's literally dying of lung cancer.
Ouch.
2 months later, he gets injured and is medically discharged from the Marines. Their kids today, as I sit here, are 3 and 2. Can't get any help from anybody. You think that doesn't mess with his mental health? He's literally watching his wife die and knows that his kids are going to grow up without their mom.
For sure.
Right? Or, and I could go on and on and on. I mean, situations that where we should be helping, but we're not. Do you know we have an aircraft carrier last year that had 17 recorded suicides? That doesn't count all the man overboards that they can't prove were accidental or on purpose. Do you know that we have a ship that it was actually just published this last week in the news where they had 8 rapes in 6 weeks? They had a serial rapist on board that they just got a hold of and arrested.
Wow.
This is all stuff, and it's toxic leadership. It's all these things, and all the programs, like when people are coming home from the military, and you guys have, I'm sure, 3 completely different experiences. But I know somebody who, when he came out of the military, you go through TAPS class, they give you all this stuff, they help you write a resume, whatever. Well, his resume was great if you wanted to be on a SWAT team or a private security company, or go back as a contractor. But explain to me how having a resume that says you're proficient on 29 different,
Weapon
systems, or that does
Is that the type of
diddly squat.
resume they're writing
It's
at TAPS?
Well,
crap.
the thing,
It's
the,
crap.
the Department of Labor pays contractors, and I went through when they first started back in the mid '90s at Great Lakes. I went through it twice. But my biggest thing when I would always ask them is like, what type of jobs have you had? They retired from the Navy, went across the street, and they started teaching this stuff. And I'm like, you don't have any credibility in my eyes. You don't know about, you're talking about getting government jobs. The first government job you had was one government to another, and you really didn't go through the process, let alone civilian jobs. They have no clue what they're teaching.
So there's a very select pool of people across all 5 branches that do what my son does. One of his buddies got out of the military, came home with one of these resumes, and the first call he said was, Mama Z, how do I fix this? Right? That's what a lot of my kids' friends call me, Mama Z. Mama Z, how do I fix this? Because this is not going to get me a job. I got calls from all the alphabet soup communities. Do you want to come back and be a contractor making 6 figures a year or doing whatever? But if that's not what you want to do,
Right.
So instead of doing it this way, you look at it and you go, how many groups have you led? How many people have you been in charges?
Exactly.
Let's look at your managerial experience. Let's look at your ability to train others. Let's look at all these things. So every program within Support Over Stigma has started with a situation like this, right? We started with care packages. We were military moms. It's what we knew how to do, right? COVID hit. I got a call from a woman who said, my 89-year-old dad is a veteran. He hasn't eaten in 4 days because he won't go to the grocery store. I'm trying to get groceries delivered, but they're saying it's going to be 3 to 4 hours. Can you just go drop off a can of soup or a sub sandwich or something, right? Like, it's killing me being 9 hours away and knowing my dad is literally starving. So I was like, and she's like, I can Venmo you money, whatever. I'm like, keep your money, send in more groceries, and went and dropped stuff off. So we started making phone calls throughout our VFWs and American Legions in the area and started Foodie Fridays, where we would drop a bag of groceries at their door.
Wow.
And it would have like a little handwritten note saying, hey, we're here. If you need something, reach out, right? And this went on for several weeks. And then one day, and I don't know if any of you have children, but it like broke my heart. Have you ever seen a scene where the little kid has their nose against the glass and they're watching for mom or dad to come home? There was a 96-year-old World War II vet standing in his door like that, waiting for me to come drop groceries at his door. And it broke my heart. And I thought, these kids don't use technology. They're not going to text. They're not going to email. They're not going to do any of these things. So we started a good old-fashioned phone tree. Well, then it was, you call next, right? Then we got to where we would have people going, I don't need the groceries, but can I get on the phone tree? Because isolationism is so huge. During that time period, we actually got a call from somebody who sits on the DuPage County opioid task force who said, Zoe, help me understand why veterans are dying exponentially faster than civilians when it comes to the opioid crisis. Well, they're self-medicating, right?
Mm-hmm.
And there's more crap in the drugs nowadays. And so more stuff is happening, right? So then, so that started that program, and then the next program, and the next program. And then one day I was meeting my friend who retired as a full bird colonel, who showed up at lunch and slammed her stuff down on the table. She was very angry. I am so freaking tired of walking into the VA and they look around me like, where's your spouse, right? She goes, me, I'm the veteran. Right. So we started a group called I Am the Veteran, and it is only female veterans. Did you know our first group had 22 people at it? Our last one had 84 people at it.
That's impressive.
And we've done everything from spa days to girls with guns because they're tired of being the only woman at the shooting range to everything in between.
Well,
right?
Yeah, because it seems like the female community are the most resistant to get involved with any veterans groups or anything.
Mm-hmm.
That tends to be the case.
And because in a lot of cases, it's their experience within the military. Right. Do you guys know that at Hines, and I don't know how it is at Lovell, but at Hines, all the women's services are in the basement?
Damn.
The women veterans refer to it as the dungeon. So if you're going to go for your yearly checkup or your mammogram or whatever, you're going to the basement.
Yeah, that's Lovell's a lot better.
Right?
Yeah, oh yeah.
So now we've started a program through our I Am the Veteran, where if somebody's going for an appointment, they can call us and we'll set up a female veteran to go and spend the day with them. So they don't have to walk. They call it the gauntlet. Like, there's one long hallway. And because of COVID, there are all these chairs in the hallway because you could only have so many in the waiting room at a time. And so it's literally like cat calls and whistles all the way down the hallway.
Are you part of the advisory council for Hines? because that's the thing is bring it up to the director of that facility about making those changes.
Right. And they're actually piloting something in Madison called the Sister to Sister program, which would allow female veterans that are volunteers to meet other female veterans. But until they move it into the Chicagoland area, we've started it on our own.
Madison's actually a pretty nice facility over there for the VA. Like, they are probably the friendliest people I've ever encountered, because I used to do a little, I was a peer support specialist for the VA briefly over at the Rockford location.
Okay.
So we would have to go to the, I think it's Vision 12 or something.
Vision 12,
yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Over there, and I'm walking down, and they're like, "Oh, how you doing? Good morning." Blah blah. I'm like, "All right, this is too friendly. Need to calm it down." But yeah, I was blown away on how the service over there is pretty good.
But our programming, right? Everything has come out of a situation. I had a gentleman come to me who said, "I'm doing my dangest to get sober, but do you know how hard it is to sit in an AA meeting and not be able to talk about, or an NA meeting and not be able to talk about what caused me to start drinking and drugging?"
Mm-hmm.
Because if I sit there and I start talking about what happened and very graphically describes what happened to his buddies when an IED took out a Humvee, right? If I start to tell that story in a regular 12-step meeting, people are going to focus on the drama and all of that, and not focus on helping me figure out how to get past that. Right. And so we've started a veteran only 12-step meeting that we have one that meets in our office 2 Fridays a month. And we've got one that's every Wednesday night online. So people from anywhere can go.
Oh, wow.
And it's actually run by a peer support specialist out of Hines who has time himself in the program.
Gotcha.
We found more and more veterans are struggling. I mean, everybody is struggling with the economy right now to make ends meet, right? But we opened a commissary in our office where you can get shelf-stable groceries and paper products and hygiene items and cleaning products. And we just had something not long ago where a Vietnam vet, he's 74 years old, showed up at my office and literally cried because I let him take not one, but 2 bottles of cleaning products. He gets his check, he pays his rent, his car payment, his insurance. He's left with $50 a month to live on.
Oh my God.
And cried because I let him take 2 bottles of cleaning products. He said, "Do you know how long it's been since I've been able to clean my toilet properly?" These are things that shouldn't
so
happen.
that opens up the door. This specific case is that where's his money come from? Just strictly Social Security, or is there a pension in Social Security?
Right now, it's
more importantly.
Right now it's Social Security, and I've worked at getting him hooked up with a VSO to work on, because initially his claim was denied.
Yeah.
And so working on that, or I work with Vietnam or with veterans, Vietnam era veterans, right? There's a lot of stigma between were you a Vietnam veteran or were you a Vietnam era veteran?
We're eras.
So here's the deal, right?
I'm young.
Do you know how many Vietnam era veterans feel like they're less than a veteran?
Oh yeah, yeah. Absolutely.
Because they feel like, well, we weren't on the ground in Vietnam, so we don't qualify for all the things that they should qualify for, right? Leave that to the guys that really deserve it.
You know what? I said that up until about 2019, when my brother Ray, a Vietnam veteran, he told me, "You're just as much of a veteran as I am." I went, "No, you guys are the ones." He goes, "Rick, you got to knock this off." It was as a result of hanging around with guys like this that I finally said, "You know what? Okay, I'm a veteran."
Well, and part of it is that, I'll leave the group unnamed. They make a big deal about, well, if you didn't, we're under fire. It's like
the elite veteran.
Yeah.
That
and I tell them, I did it for 20 years. It just that with my line, I was a grunt, so I was expected to go to combat. But I think tell them, I says, "Hey, I was there for 20 years. I just never got the call to go anywhere, to do anything." And and they turn around, so you could be an associate member. I said, "You can stick that in your ass."
Yeah.
Exactly.
But it's other veterans who have made them feel that way. It's the way everybody was treated when they came back during that era.
Right.
Oh, yeah.
I have a female veteran I'm working with right now.
No, I've seen it.
A female Marine from the area where I live. A female Marine in Vietnam. So just put that in perspective, right?
Wow.
She rides a bike, Harley.
She
I won't be surprised.
I think I know who she is.
She's the definition of badass.
Jesus.
But something happened recently and she's had a series of medical emergencies. And so we're actually going out next week and rebuilding like her front porch and helping her put railings in so she'll be able to more easily get in and out. But so every program that we do, everything that we do, we didn't sit back and go, oh, I think this is what veterans need. No, it's veterans coming to us saying,
Right.
This is what we need.
Yeah.
Right. And one of our biggest programs that is the most effective is called our peer-to-peer mentorship program. Right. So I'm not going to pair a Vietnam or veteran or a Vietnam era veteran with an OEF or an OIF because you saw two totally different wars, right? It's the same thing with, I'm never going to pair a Marine up with an Air Force guy, right? Because again, you saw two totally different wars, right? Like,
that was United Airlines.
We laugh on paper. My kid's Air Force on paper, but that's not what he does. So, but it just, right. And so even too, like, even with female veterans, right, pairing them up with somebody with a similar experience, because there's so much to be said for that peer-to-peer help. And so many, I know a lot of people talk bad about the VA, right? The VA, I know some really great people that work for the VA. I know some not so great people that work at the VA, but the VA can have the most incredible programs out there. But if I can't get my guy or gal through the door, it doesn't do them any good. Right. And so a big part of what we do is, I don't look like a shrink. I don't talk like a shrink. I have a Vietnam vet that for 7 months, I met him on a park bench along the Fox River because that's where he felt safe. And it took me almost 8 months to finally get him to meet me inside somewhere for a cup of coffee. Wow. And that was like in our very first year. We're about 3.5 years into this. And he recently got a call from his ex-wife and one of his kids saying, I don't know what you've done, but you've worked miracles. Like he's finally reaching out and having conversations. He's finally sharing things and pieces of things. And the daughter said, I'm sure we'll never get the whole story, but he's sharing pieces of things that help us understand why he is the way he is.
What I'm kind of baffled about is that, you're mentioning there's a pile of need. I mean, obviously there's a need there that we veterans haven't even seen yet. I mean, you're describing things that are incredible.
You're right.
So we had interviewed people here from Road Home Project and et cetera, where they claim, and with a great deal of reason behind that claim, is that, hey, if we have a veteran out in California, he can't come in for treatment or he or she can't come in for treatment because they have a mortgage to pay. They got a job. They need that income. They can't come up here for 3-4 weeks. We will pay their mortgage. We'll pay their flight ticket. We'll pay their groceries, etc. Plus, we'll pay the expenses of their stay here and the program.
Right.
And we've already heard from several people, and the word that I heard was, and I'll never forget these words, I got my life back. And so what I'm thinking of, here's this resource, this amazing resource that's in your area. I know you know about the Road Home Project. What I'm wondering, though, is any of those folks that you're exposed to, are they being directed into that area? Because I understand that they'll take them.
We actually have sent several people to the Road Home program as well.
Right. Okay.
And see, the difference is, if I'm going to pick on you because you're sitting next to me, if you come to me, right, and you're struggling, if I take you to the nearest hospital, that hospital reports to the state, you're going to lose every FOID privilege you've ever had.
Right. Oh, yeah.
If I take you to a VA hospital, the VA is a federal hospital. They don't report to the state of Illinois. We preserve your FOID status. Good. Right? Which is where Road Home gets tricky because Road Home reports to the state.
Interesting.
So some people will and some people won't. It's a phenomenal program. I actually have one of our other programs is a spouse and caregiver support group that we do, and it's online on the 4th Monday of every month. And what we do, we actually have people from all over the country, but a lot of times we can kind of backdoor our way into helping that veteran, right? Because just like in AA, right, you have AA and you have Al-Anon. So sometimes the alcoholic's not ready to get help yet, but the spouse or caregiver is. So a lot of times we can backdoor in that way. A big belief that we have, and I'm very, very adamant about this. because of my own family members, because of things that I've lived through and seen, my first memory of PTSD, they didn't even call it that yet, right? PTSD in the Civil War was called soldier's heart. And then in World War I, we called it shell shock.
Right.
And in World War II, they started to call it combat fatigue.
Right.
And that lasted all the way through Vietnam. And then it wasn't until much later that they came to PTSD. My very first memory of whatever you want to call this, I was not quite 5 years old. I was spending the night at my aunt and uncle's house, and I woke up to my uncle strangling my aunt in her sleep because he was having a flashback and thought she was Viet Cong.
Wow.
That leaves a pretty massive impression on you. And so this has always been my mission to try to help, right? But I've got a case right now I'm working on. 3.5 years of documentation this guy has where he was asking for mental health help. 3.5 years. Finally, he loses his stuffing, punches out his NCO, gets a dishonorable. 3.5 years he's asking for help, right? If we had gotten him the help he needed 3.5 years ago, he never would have gotten that dishonorable.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, there are cases where people deserve a dishonorable, right? I mean, there are things that happen, but we help it regardless of the status of discharge, which makes us different.
Where is the underlying issue here? I mean, there's a lot of water passing under this bridge. What is the issue? What is it? Is it human?
Toxic leadership.
That's what it boils down to.
Toxic leadership.
You know, I don't think I agree with that part.
It's a big piece of it.
It's a combination of things, and it's not, you can't really point your finger to any one thing. It's just like I have a guy that's out there, it was a long range patrol in Vietnam, and every time he sees me, he goes, "You got PTSD, you got PTSD." And I'm like, shut the fuck up. I ain't got PTSD. I'm never in the combat. And just because I've been married a few times doesn't mean I have PTSD.
Misconception numero uno.
But the thing
Not only combat veterans suffer PTSD.
But-
Going to boot camp changes the physical makeup of your brain. It changes how your amygdala and your hypothalamus and your thyroid and your adrenal gland work just by going through basic training. Especially, do you know the number one branch for suicides? Marine Corps.
Oh, sure.
Number one.
A lot of that
Right?
has to do with other issues.
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
I'm not playing devil's advocate
No,
here.
No,
I'm just saying that the
but-
Marine Corps recruit training process changed me, and there's no doubt about it.
Mm-hmm.
It changed every single one of us. But it also made us very functioning and efficient citizens. So as far as the other things are concerned, we cope with things a little bit differently because we've been yelled at, screamed at, poked in the eye, things like this. We you can look at it from the perspective of PTSD. I have nightmares. I never had a nightmare over recruit training. I had a nightmare over issues that pertain to my experiences as a police officer. But have I had nightmares over recruit training? We laugh at that.
Mhm.
Okay. It changes you, but it changes you into a better functioning, efficient.
But society and the media have told us that PTSD is flashbacks and nightmares. Do you know there's 28 other symptoms of PTSD?
Certainly.
You know what the number one is that usually results in suicide? It's not the flashbacks or the nightmares. It's chronic insomnia. Do you know how many suicide letters I've read or family members I've sat with? I have a very dear friend, and in 2 weeks, it'll be a year since we lost Paul. And Paul was a Marine's Marine. He was there anytime, day or night. He would be there for you in a heartbeat. And in his suicide letter that he posted online, he said, "I haven't slept in weeks." It can be overeating, undereating. It can be a million and five things. When we start talking about self-medicating, everybody goes to drugs or alcohol. Do you know how many other forms of self-medicating there are? How many wives or spouses or significant others I've sat with who say, but he's not self-medicating or she's not self-medicating because they're not drinking or drugging. Are they spending 15 hours video gaming? Are they spending 10 hours at the gym? Are they gambling? Are they smoking, even if it's not illegal substances?
Right.
Are they? Do you know the fastest segment of self-medicating right now in the US amongst veterans?
No.
Porn.
Oh,
in female veterans, and they're not watching it, they're reading it. And when you read it, when a man sits down and watches porn,
Yeah.
it affects one piece of his brain. But when a woman sits down and reads it, they start with Grandma's Harlequin or dime store novel, right? And then they go to 50 Shades of Grey. Well, all of a sudden that's not heavy enough,
Right.
and they read something even racier and stronger and stronger. But when they read it, your brain processes it differently because you create it in your own brain. So it actually involves more parts of your brain. It's actually a much harder
You're
addiction to
describing the
break.
conditioning.
Right. And so it's a much harder thing to break. Do you know that domestic violence issues, because I work very closely with a couple different counties veteran courts, there's been a drastic increase in orders of protection against female veterans. I've got a man right now who is a male veteran who I got a call from the VA called me because this guy's the victim of domestic violence, and there are no domestic violence shelters for men
right.
anywhere.
If I might,
Mhm.
The feel that I get here, the emotional context that I'm experiencing here is that over a period of time, with your exposure, your constant ongoing bombardment of these various issues that come up, and you're identifying an entire
Whole litany. Yep.
exactly
Mhm.
of various issues. Well, it kind of reminds me of, and I'm going to make a point here. It kind of reminds me of when I worked at Paddy Wagon. After about 2 years of working at Paddy Wagon, I couldn't tell the difference between an honest tax-paying citizen and the guy at the bar trying to smash me in the head with a beer bottle. I treated them all the same. I want your license, insurance, and registration.
Mhm.
You know, show me your hands. It was those type of things. And over a period of time, I realized I got to get out of that Paddy Wagon. Okay, and then 3 weeks after the Paddy Wagon, here I'm saying, hello, sir, how are you today? You know, those type of things. So that exposure turns you into a conditioned cynic, you know, someone is skeptical. But here's my point. I'm going to get right to my point right now. I cannot help but to imagine the large numbers of individuals that came back from World War II, and then right after World War II, say whatever you want to about us being unscathed as a nation, but we built an entire nation. We built highway structures, buildings, everything. We built a nation. Who built that nation? Veterans with PTSD, all these other life, the shell shock, you name it. Those guys that suffered the bombardments in Bastogne came, and in Iwo Jima, the survivors came back and built the country.
Right.
So there's a very positive feature in reference to that, with all of the failures that existed because those mechanisms to support them didn't even exist at all. VA wasn't even in office yet.
Right.
So, and that's where I'm coming from, is that now we're identifying a whole bunch of things today, but we can't, I guess my point is, it doesn't seem to be a balanced perspective here, because there are a lot of veterans coming back from the Gulf War and everything else that are incredibly productive citizens, male and females. I watched interviews hours long with females that served as nurses in Vietnam, and they came back very productive citizens. And they were the first ones to say, I didn't want to become involved in anything, just leave me alone, because of their experiences when they came back getting spit on, things like this. But then when they had their monument put together in Washington, D.C., they orbited around it. You know, there was a need there, and that need was met to a certain point. But I think your perspective seems to be on probably because of the bombardment, but seems to be on the cynical side rather than looking at also the positive side too. Can you address that at all? Or?
Yeah, no, my personal perspective is very different. I'm throwing out all of the facts, the problems, the situations that we deal with on a daily basis, and I sit here as one person.
And you're doing
right?
that well.
I have a board. We have over 150 volunteers. I have a list of 90 veterans and first responders that will take phone calls 24/7, so that nobody has to fight alone. right? And I can tell you thing after thing after thing that people are doing right. I could sit here and talk to you about Cassandra Taylor, a 28-year Army veteran who started a group called Top Flight Defense that focuses solely on women veterans and women in low-income neighborhoods and helping the world be a better place. I could talk to you about Priscilla, who runs the female peer support group at Heinz. I could talk to you about, person after person and tell you all those positive stories where they've come home and they've taken their own things. There's an amazing place out in DeKalb called the Herbal Oracle, and it's run by a woman, an Army veteran who got tired of going to the VA and always getting thrown more medication and more prescriptions. So she literally went back to school and became the equivalent of an 1800s apothecary, and she carries over 100 almost 120 herbs in her store.
Oh.
So if you go to her and you tell her,
I was in DeKalb a couple weeks ago, actually.
she's right on Main Street. If you tell her you're having trouble getting to sleep or staying asleep,
Right.
or this and that, she'll explain to you, like, this soap has peppermint and lavender and can explain to you all the reasons why it works, right? There's Mike Tellerino with Canines for Veterans, who realized service dogs save lives, right? And I could tell you story after story after story about veterans who are doing that as well. Right. I think the reason when I do podcasts and when I do things like that I tend to focus on the other stories is because as much as these people are doing amazing stuff, we are still losing way too many people every single day.
Good point.
Yeah,
so I think that's
why
I focus on the awareness side of it a lot.
Right.
When it comes to me personally, and something I've seen in a lot of other organizations, is you have these organizations who have this great start, right? Like a shooting star, they're doing amazing things, and then they fall apart. Well, why do they fall apart? Because the people running those organizations didn't know how to do self-care, right?
Right.
There are certain people that one in particular, and who saw some very heavy stuff in Bosnia. And the first 3 times I met with that veteran, I literally had to go home and shower and just like envisioned washing all of that off because it was such heavy stuff, right? But if you don't take care of yourself, you can't take care of other people, right? It's just like if a veteran reached out to you for help, right, but you weren't taking care of you, how are you going to be able to give anything to that veteran? Or that other person, right? Or first responder.
Back in the late 80s, mid 80s or so, I was taking courses with the Police Association of Nova Scotia that paid for our classes and so forth. We had George Everly, the people that wrote the book, Curriculums and Stress Debriefing, CISD, and we took these classes, and that's one of the things that they had mentioned. Is that who takes care of the care worker? Who takes care of that? You're always helping other people. You're peering up and taking care of their business, but you're getting a lot of that rub off on you when you get somebody that describes a little baby in a car that caught on fire, and you watch them burn to death and so forth. Then that's in you.
Right.
You just experienced it, whether you like it or not. It's in your head. So, who takes care of that?
And the number of times I have people sit down and talk to me and say, I'm so grateful that I could have this conversation with you because I know my spouse or significant other wants to help, but I don't want to put that poison in their brain.
Right.
Right. Or one particular one that just really broke my heart was someone who grew up with a very huge sense of faith, and it was really important to him. And after his time where he served, came home and said to me, he said, Zoe, God will forgive me, but I can't forgive me. Right. Or, and that's where the whole subject of moral injury comes in. Are you guys familiar with moral injury? Yeah.
When I was over in treatment at the VA over at Level, they talked about moral injury where, one of the guys that came in, he was from, I believe, Africa, and like these troops, like they killed his whole family. And so and he became I think it was a priest that came in, one of the chaplain or something. So came in talking to us, and like the very most unsuspecting person that you would think that would go through something like that. But like, it doesn't matter. Like, me as, someone who goes to AA, you see all walks of life, like people that seem like, oh, you're well put together. What are you here for? Like, you have no idea how, experiences will get us. And moral injury is huge. And then also the fact of that you brought up with the, for example, I'm peer sports special. Yeah, at that time I was, but I'm getting asked by some of my coworkers, like, are you okay? Checking in sort of thing, because you also need to take care of the gears that are working
Right.
with you as well too. And, when it comes to the, like what Rick was talking about, the high production rate, or, when it came to building things and all that, building societies and all that, for me, for example, we're trained from boot camp, never give up, never surrender, and all that stuff. Doesn't matter what's going on in your head, you just keep going forward and stuff. And so, like, I'll see my buddies, like, they're doing great things because that's how they're conditioned. And a lot of the times you are unknowingly conditioning your body, whether it's positive things or you're conditioning yourself for negative things, and then you're trying to look for an escape, because, like, with some of the addictions that you were talking about, they're very sneaky. That can creep right in, and you don't even know that that's an addiction. And you can be addicted to the most addictive thing in the world, and that's this here in your head, these chemicals here. Because, like, you can get rid of drinking, all that stuff, and some of the most addictive things are the ones that are created by thought alone and all that. But
I want to scoot back just a half a second for anybody who's watching or listening to this. So the easiest way to, in case you haven't heard of moral injury, the easiest way to explain moral injury is from the time we're born till about the time we turn 17, 18 years old, whether it's church, society, scouts, your friends, your family, you build your moral code, right? Well, then you go into the military and you're asked to do things in direct opposition of that. And that's what we call a moral injury. Right. And so whomever your moral authority is, whether it's people in your life, whether it's a higher power as you understand it, right? God, in whatever form you understand him or her, until you deal with that, a lot of the other stuff isn't going to fall in place. And you brought up, like, the greatest, what's referred to commonly as the greatest generation, right? People we have in the military nowadays don't have the same base to build on in most cases. Back then, good, bad, indifferent, whatever your opinions on it are, people had a much stronger moral base
absolutely
going into the military.
Yeah.
Do you guys know who J.T. Cooper is?
Sounds really familiar.
So J.T. Cooper was actually featured in the movie Black Hawk Down. Okay. And I talked to him once, and he said, he describes it as, I came out of training and I was a sharpshooter and I was a this and I was a sniper and I was a that, no, whatever. And thought I was all that till the first time I looked down that thing, and it was no longer a target. It was a person.
Right.
And my NCO said, Coop, take the shot, eliminate the target, right? And you look through and it's no longer a target. It's a person. And he said, I asked a second time, sir, you want me to, Coop, eliminate the target? And he looked through it again and he said, but sir, he said, Coop, it's him or your friends, take the effing shot, right? And it still took him 3 times to pull the trigger, because it's not how we're built. Right. And after that, it started to get easier. It should never get easier. Right. It's not how most of us are built. And so that's that moral injury. And until you deal with that, until you whatever your process of dealing with that is, I can give you the best talk therapy and the best drugs in the world. But if you still have that hanging out over here in the 6 inches between your ears, what are you going to do? Right. I had a young guy come, he was on leave for 2 weeks before he was deployed. And he said, he walked in my office and he said, I heard you help veterans and I don't need you to say anything. I just need you to listen. And I'm sitting behind my desk and I'm like, okay. And he starts pacing and he just starts talking for probably 45 minutes. And through the course of the conversation, I was able to ascertain that he was home for 2 weeks. His mom looked really tired, but she said she was fine, just working a lot of hours. He got deployed. While he was on deployment, he got the call that his mom died of cancer. But she didn't want to tell him because she didn't want to distract him while he was over there. Right? So this whole conversation was about him coming to grips with that. So sometimes it's that kind of a moral injury. Sometimes it's, I had a man walk into my office not long ago who walked in and went, I'm not armed. I said, good to know. but there's a loaded gun under the seat of my truck. I need you to help me understand and remember why I don't want to put it in my mouth and pull the trigger. Right? Because of, and then dumped his stuff. We were able, after a certain amount of conversation, let me call a battle buddy. The battle buddy got him to the VA. Eventually, the soon-to-be ex-spouse called me and shared a little more about what was going on.
Zoe, how do you come in contact with the several numbers of people that you had come in contact with? How does that happen?
Divine intervention.
Started up.
Seriously.
You're boiling it down to divine intervention.
Seriously. We in 3.5 years.
That's how we got
That's how we met,
like,
right? It was well, and you know the funny story behind that?
What's that?
I don't know if I should say that if this is going to go out to the world. I'm sitting at home one day and I get a Facebook message. Lady Sunshine would like to speak with you. I'm like, I bet she would. And I got up and walked away from my computer, right? A couple days later, Lady Sunshine would like to connect with you. Yeah, okay, whatever.
Is that your call sign?
Couple days later, no. Couple days later, I
had a wig on.
a couple days later, I get an email from a person who identified herself. And that's like what she goes by because of what her job is. She can't like be known by her name on social media.
Sunshine.
And that's how I ended up meeting you, right?
Oh, all right.
So, but we are
That
over
works in mysterious ways.
30,000 people we've helped in 3.5 years that we've touched, that we can track. Now, if you came to me and I helped you, but your spouse your wife didn't attend any of our programs, we don't count her, even though we know by helping you, her life has been affected.
He's going to need a lot of help. Too,
we only count the ones who participate in our programs.
Right.
So that can look like care packages to deployed troops, because that is something that's so important. At one point in my son's unit of 100,
you guys reached out and touched
over 30,000 people.
What kind of a budget do you have?
Not very big. Not very big when you compare it to most. My budget
Where
this year.
are you getting your support?
My budget this year hit 6 digits for the first time in 4 years of writing
Awesome.
budgets. And so a lot of it is private donations. A lot of it is applying for grants. Believe it or not, our most expensive program is care packages to deployed troops, because it's not just the cost of everything going in the box that's gone up, but it's the cost of actually shipping the box that's gone up.
Yeah.
But those are so important because so many people that go into the military come out of foster care. They've got nobody at home. At one point, my son was in a group of 100 people. 37 of them came out of foster care homes, had nobody at home.
Oh, shit.
At one point, his team jumps in and out of a lot of different bases. And at one point, he was rooming with a guy who'd been there and continued to volunteer to stay there because he had nobody to come home to. And in the 3.5 years he'd been on this foreign base, he'd not once received a letter, a package, anything. So my son said to me, Mom, don't send me a box this month. Send it to so-and-so, right? Well, of course, I'm a mom. I sent him both boxes. But he eventually called me when they got there and he said, here is this 6'5", 300 pounds of muscle sitting on his bed with his knees to his chest like a toddler, rocking, crying because somebody's cared enough to send a care package. We have a young gal who lives out past just west of us. I live in the St. Charles area, and she was in a MU unit. And so we sent her a bunch of boxes because we knew there were plenty of people to share with. And she said, Mama Kay, the thing that's amazing to me is the snacks were great. The mental health information was wonderful. But do you know the number of Marines I heard say, you mean people at home still care? That's amazing to me that people know we still care, right? When it comes to our programming, and story after story after story, like I could talk for hours and hours and hours. We had a situation, we were at mental health awareness night at the King County Cougars game, right? And there was a young lady that was working there, and through the course of conversation, learned that her dad was a veteran. And towards the end of the game, there was fireworks. And she said, there's a mass exodus at the top of the 9th inning of veterans, right? Because there's going to be fireworks. She said, I don't get it. Don't they know the fireworks are the best part? So of course, being a mom, I had to step in and
Tell
say
us when someone's
something.
been in
And
combat.
but I explained it to her. She started to cry. This 15-year-old girl started to cry. She said, I always just thought my dad was a jerk and didn't like fun.
Right.
Because anytime there was going to be fireworks, he would hide in the basement with his noise canceling headphones. Right. And I never understood. So then later in the summer, had the opportunity to be back there for something else. And she came running up, gave me a great big hug. She said, you know what we did for the 4th of July? She said, I went down to the basement with my dad. And we said, the hell with the noise canceling earphones. And we watched Lord of the Rings and we cranked it up to like 80 decibels or something. Like we were rattling the windows. And my dad knows he never has to be alone again. Right. Those are the stories. That's the ripple effect. Right. Because just as the person who's struggling, that has ripple effects to everybody in their life. It's their spouse, their kids, their work, their neighbors, everybody. Right. So instead of letting all the negatives crap have the ripple effect, why can't we have the same effect, ripple effect with the good stuff? Right.
How many programs do you have? You mentioned already peer-to-peer.
You
mentioned
these
so
are
many. Fascinating. There's a lot of programs.
Right.
With an organization that touched 30,000 people within the last 3 years, and you have multiple programs. Can you give us a list of? So
I would say the top ones are our peer-to-peer support program or mentorship program, right? We're very quick to say, not counselors. We don't have all of the extra letters after our name, right? Peer-to-peer. The caregiver and spouse support group, our commissary, our 12-step program. We just wrote a grant that I'm super excited about to start something called Warrior Kids because of the effects of secondary PTSD on the children, right? We have a program that we teach that's called Healthy Menu, Healthy Mind, where there are so many studies between what we put in our mouth and how your gut health affects your mental health, right? And so it goes on. The I Am the Veteran program, care packages. It goes on and on and on.
And all of this started because you're a mom and you're going to take care of your son.
Mm-hmm. All of this started because I wanted to find resources to help my son. And here's like the crazy
thing. Tell our listeners, if you'll be so kind, how do our listeners, if they wanted to support your program, how do they contact you?
So the best way is to go to our website, which is supportoverstigma.org. So that's the best way. All of our phone numbers and emails are on there. And it also will tell you a little bit about our board. Everybody on our board either has a direct connection with military or first responders, which is amazing. So that's probably the best way. Follow us on social media. Facebook and Instagram are probably the best, that are the most up to date.
Yeah, I see all the time on Facebook. So the other thing to add in really quickly is that and we talked about this before, but just for the viewers, what discharge do you need in order to utilize your services? Because I know some places you have to have completely honorable, and anything other than that, they don't, because I know there's, like with the guy that you were talking about, where he's talking about 3 and 3.5 years of asking for help, and then so
we help regardless of the status of discharge. And there are other places too where you have to have a minimum of 180 days of active duty or whatever. We also do a lot of work. People don't realize right now in the state of Illinois, we have 5 National Guard groups deployed. We have 2 or 3 more that will go out before the end of the summer.
Wow.
So we work with them as well. Because if you're National Guard and you get deployed, your spouse or significant other is now a single parent working with half the money, trying to juggle it all, and whatever they're going through is going to affect your mental health while you're 9,000 miles away from home.
Absolutely.
Right. So if we help that person, that helps you. Right. And so that's why we are very much the whole family. We actually have written a program that we've just written grants for called Valor 360 Wellness. And the whole point is, whether it starts with suicide prevention, mental health, spouse and caregiver support group, helping the kids, helping the what you're eating, the fitness program, as well as the employment and job programs, right? It literally is a complete 360 program, and it's so important because we are not one-dimensional creatures. Right.
Well, one thing is what you've demonstrated here today is that there's several things. First off, we commend you for this. One, you're a heck of a resource within our region. And you have a lot of connections to other resources that you can branch out to, and you can almost provide just about any holistic approach if you want to in terms of whatever issues people might have. That would be veterans and their families and their grandkids for that matter. So if somebody wanted to reach out to you, could they do so via your email address?
They do.
Could we? Could you let them know what that might be in case somebody needs you right now?
Absolutely. My personal email address is my first name. It's Z like zebra, OEIE at supportoverstigma.org. And that will come directly to me. The ones on the website are info at, and those either go to me or one other person in my organization. But like you said, one of the things when I first started this, and I thought this was very telling, is as I was hunting so hard for resources to help my own son, across the street and a block and a half down is somebody else who the husband's a 30-year Air Force vet, and he and his wife have a nonprofit that works with veterans. I didn't even know they existed, and I lived in my house for 25 years.
No kidding.
And so a big part of what I've done is really try to network the nonprofit group, because like you said, I can't help everyone, but chances are I know somebody who can. Right? Like I will never train service dogs. Service dogs are extremely important. I firmly believe in them. That's not my gift. Right?
You have a donate button on your
I have
website.
a donate button on my website as well. We've got a couple big events coming up. One is May 18th. We are holding Steps of Strength, a walk to end veteran suicide. And the reason that's so important is I might only make the 1K walk. You might do the 5K. You might do the 10K. But the whole point, just like mental health is, did you take the first step? Right. So that's coming up on May 18th. June 12th, we've got a big event where we're taking over parts of a baseball stadium for Female Veterans Day.
Nice.
We've got several other things coming up as well, but those are our next two big ones.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, it is time for us to sign off. And I can't believe it. This is quite a dynamic show that you put on for us here today. And it's totally appreciated. You hit the mark as far as what the intentions are of our podcast. And that is to reach out to veterans, to provide a service to our veterans and their families. And you just hit every mark on our behalf. I want to say thank you for that.
Yeah. And I think the one thing, if you take nothing away from everything you've heard today, if you take nothing away from anything else, I want you to take this one thing away. There is hope. There is help. There are people who want to walk this walk with you. The strongest, most courageous thing, the hardest thing you have to do is pick up that phone and call me or email me, because from that point forward, there is somebody who is going to walk every step of that walk with you. But you got to pick up the phone or reach out, because we don't know you're struggling if you don't. So that's what I want to leave everybody with.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Folks, I want to say thank you for joining us on Roger That Chronicles. Zoeie Kreiner from Support Over Stigma. Reach out and support
Out of St.
them.
Charles.
Out of St. Charles, Illinois.
Beautiful place, by the way.
It is a beautiful
Love it.
place.
But we're also in 5 states and across the world on electronic devices. So don't let my geographical location prevent you from reaching out.
That's awesome. And our next show, we hope to have a coroner on board here to talk to us.
I hear it's going to be a little bit of a stiff show. I had to. He's a Marine too, so he'll get my humor.
idea where this come from. The stuff we have to put up with.
I had to.
Never a dull moment.
Right. All righty. And if you're done, right?
Okay.
He's never done.
No,
He's
never.
never finished.
All righty. So if you like what you hear,
She
definitely.
said.
So if you like what you hear, and to help us out with the YouTube algorithm and all that good stuff, hit the subscribe button, a little bit of a tongue twister, the like button, the bell notification for future videos on YouTube, and then also check us out on Apple, Twitch, Twitter, Spotify. We want to thank our producers, 216 The Net, behind the camera, Kent Jones, and thank you very much for viewing.
I think we're also looking for sponsors too.
And sponsors too, yes, lots of sponsors.
Go ahead, Mike. Sorry.
So, yeah, go ahead. Anyway, if you're a veteran or if you're a spouse of a veteran, there's a lot of organizations out there that you can come home for people that are like-minded and who walk the walk. You got the American Legion, the VFW, you got the Marine Corps League, Fleet Reserve Association, AMVETS, Navy League and numerous other organizations out there. Just find one that you fit into and then get connected. Don't need help? Not a problem. Come out anyway. At one point, you may find out that there's resources that are available to you, or you may have the resources that's available that other veterans can use.
Awesome.
Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.
Semper Fi.